Amy, which is a new documentary by Asif Kapadia, who did Senna a couple of years ago. And this is a story of Amy Winehouse, who died tragically in 2011, just 27-year-old. So Kapadia knew very little about the story of Amy Winehouse, obviously was aware of who she was, lived just down the road from where it was all happening. He was approached by Universal, the record label, to make a documentary, and he was fascinated, did a lot of research. It could have been very tasteless, but he handles it with such compassion. He's very aware that those close to Amy would be sceptical about a film so soon after her death, and he doesn't shove a camera in their faces. He just puts them in a room and talks like heart to heart with them, and just says, talk about whatever you want, just sort of anything that comes to your mind. And they would sit there for hours, close personal friends, family, staff, like bodyguards, managers, and you just get them comfortable, record the audio, and if they wanted it to be in the film, they could sign a release. If not, it wouldn't be seen by anybody. So because everybody feels relaxed, everybody's open, everybody's honest and detailed about their accounts, and it paints the whole picture. So from the very beginning of her music career as a young child, with an incredible voice beyond her age, to her death right at the end of the story. So even those who don't know anything about Amy Winehouse can still get to know her and still feel distressed by the end, just as you would with a fictional character in a fictional film. Something interesting that Kapadia said in the Q&A following the screening we saw on Tuesday was that the role of the camera is really important in the story. A lot of the footage in the first half is personal footage, where it's either Amy holding the camera or somebody else holding the camera pointing at Amy, and she's looking directly down the lens towards us in the audience. But as the film progresses, she becomes more and more less trusting of the camera, and it moves out of her control and into the hand of those who want to see her fail. So that's the paparazzi who try to make a cheap story. The interesting thing also is that the film plays out as a musical, so a lot of lyrics on screen which plug the gaps where there's not a great deal of footage. And you look at the honesty of her lyrics, and I mean, some of it plays out like a cry for help, and it explains the situations more than any kind of footage could. It's a really sobering movie. It breaks down the stigma of mental health, bulimia and addiction, all those things she suffered from. It's not possible to tell a mentally ill person to stop being mentally ill. You can't tell a drug addict to stop taking drugs. And this film really puts demons into perspective. She grows up very fast, as you see in the film. She started in the industry from as young as 17-year-old, and she died at 27, and that's 10 years, what seems like a lifetime worth of drama. She didn't want to be famous. She's just a jazz singer, and they would typically prefer to be in a small room of people who all really appreciate her music and how talented she is. And the pressure did get to her. She says in an interview at the start of the film that she wouldn't be able to handle fame, and people would realise that all she's good for is making tunes. And she becomes a really easy target for the media. And you think about it, we're all responsible, we all joined in, and we didn't really understand what was going on underneath all the media scrutiny. There's a really powerful moment in the film where she's overcome her demons for the time being, and she's won really big at the Grammys, and she's surrounded by people who love her, and she's genuinely happy for the first time in God knows how long. And I did start to cry because I felt really sort of happy for her and how far she's come from all the trauma. Her husband's in incarceration, and he's led her down such a dark path, but she's finally getting back on track. And you just see the heartbreak in her eyes, and you really feel for her that she's not enjoying herself under it all, because she's not under the influence of something, and it's really disturbing, it's really damning when you see that happen. So the film really portrays the media in a very negative light, although really it's as honest it could be. Tabloid papers and paparazzi went out of their way to crush Amy Winehouse. They knew exactly where she'd be. Her phone was presumably being hacked. The media have blood on their hands. They pushed her to breaking point. And you think, going into the film, I mean, we both kind of thought that this would be a film of remorse.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And we thought it would be depressing. But it's a celebration. The legacy she leaves behind is far stronger than any kind of negative headlines and photos out there. If you compare it with other documentaries this year, Gascoigne, for example, he was tormented by the media at such a young age, and it just shows how sort of discompassionate and uncaring the media are towards young people. You'd think they'd know better, just to fill pages in a newspaper. I'd rather newspapers were thinner than have to pad them out with stories like this, when it's a life at stake. As such an immense talent that she's scrutinised for the way she behaves, something she can't help. And then, of course, there's Kurt Cobain, who also died at 27-year-old. That documentary arguably geared more towards the fans, but it's just as evocative and harrowing. I mean, you see Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love shivering on a bed under the influence of horrible drugs. And of course, he died as well.
There are arguably worse images in this film, no?
It probably is worse because he feels such a great connection to her. I mean, Kurt Cobain was troubled for a long time. Winehouse was just this immense talent. One interesting thing that her dad, Mitch Winehouse, he doesn't like the film, and he's looking at legal action to get it recut or taken away, I guess. It doesn't portray Amy in any kind of negative light. It's the best possible way to portray her. We get to see her entire talent, her immense songwriting. She was one of the greatest lyric writers I've ever seen, and you see that on the screen, and it's just so apparent that it's such a waste. But for him, it paints him in a negative light because it's what he did. Throughout her life, he was putting himself above her and ahead of her, doing things that were better for his career than her. I mean, when Amy died, he became a singer and piggybacked off her success to become successful himself. And he calls himself a coward at the start of the film, and that's really true. He had an affair when Amy was really young, and that's caused her a lot of emotional trauma. And he's often seen putting himself that he takes a film crew out to a really personal family holiday for Amy, and he's often irresponsible, and he dislikes the film because he is a coward. And I think if he could put his own ego aside and just think about how a beautiful memorial this is to his fantastically talented daughter, then I don't know. But it works its way towards an inevitable ending. It's an absolute gut punch, because you just spent 2 hours in the company of such a bubbly and vibrant talent that your heart just sinks, shatters into pieces. I was distraught, and I didn't think I would be, but I mean, it wasn't just me. The entire room, you could hear it in the air, you could hear the sniffling, and it wasn't just because it was so hot, there was moisture in the air. It's so hard not to be moved by it. It's an absolute tragedy, but the musical talent is unparalleled. She's so witty, so intelligent, and by far one of the finest songwriters of the 21st century. She was troubled and vulnerable, and she was consumed by the ugly side of the media. But if you have a negative perception of Amy Winehouse going into this film, I do not think you will afterwards. That's Amy.
Well,
that's Amy.
I wasn't aware you were that much of a fan of Winehouse.
The thing is, I didn't realise until recently that I do think about her quite a lot, because I remember where I was when she died, and it's kind of the same thing that when Bobby Robson died, I can remember that as well. And these are all just, they do make an impact. They leave a lasting impression, and you look back to the way she was portrayed and the way her career played out, and you just think she could have been so much more. But the way she worked, she wasn't ready for the whole studio system. She was bigger than that. And I hadn't realised till recently that I am quite a big fan, and I haven't listened to her enough.
Fair enough.
But her lyrics just tell full stories. We're going to treat you at the end, and we're going to play a song by Amy Winehouse. I think she's just fantastic, and I think this film really does that justice. What did you think?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly raw filmmaking, and it's emotionally evocative storytelling of a broken woman who really was just hounded by the media, and you can't really do much about that. I mean, it's not going to stop. I mean, the director was saying, like, hopefully, it will stop, but it's not. This is what the media always has been and what it's always going to be. Mm-hmm. It's always, I mean, they have to get their stories from somewhere, the tabloids. And when they're not chasing around politicians or finding scandals about who's claimed dog food and expenses, it's got to be something about celebrities. And Amy Winehouse was the biggest target that you could find, upcoming, low-born girl who's just, got with a beehive haircut, who drinks and drugs and has a sort of a controversial boyfriend. She was prime target.
Yeah.
Having all that talent under her shoulders, and she was prime target to be targeted by the media, and he was, and obviously that was a massive effect on her. But I mean, it's just some moments in the film where you do get relative chills. I mean, I didn't really care for Amy Winehouse myself as a person, but after this, you really do empathise with her as a person and as a great talent. I mean, there was that scene where she's recording Back to Black for the first time, and it was chills, because you can see, like, there's such a popular song being recorded for the first time, and just the lyrics on screen, I thought, just really added quite a lot to it as well, made it quite a visual spectacle, as well as hearing the music. It was a great sound system in the Tyneside Cinema, cinema in Newcastle, which we will plug a lot because it's great. So search it up for yourselves. But yeah, it just really chills at times. I mean, it did feel a bit like a funereal air at the end, because obviously everyone knows what happens to Amy Winehouse, and even though they know it's coming, there were desperate people, shocked, gasping at the end. I mean, they do show a lot more than I expected, so I was glad with that. Yeah, it's just really, really grim and just really good tale of a broken woman. I definitely feel for her.
Amy is out today. It's a 15, and you can see that at the Tyneside Cinema all week. We're gonna have some